Our next speaker in this session is Mr. Rajsekhar Budhavarapu. He's the managing partner at ACESS Advisors LLP. With an experience of more than 27 years in the field of renewable energy, he does consultancy and advisories for wind energy, solar PV, and hybrid energy storage. Today, Mr. Rajsekhar will talk about the reforms for commercialization of renewable energy. So, delegates, let's welcome Mr. Rajsekhar Budhavarapu.
Thing that we need to be very cognizant is the fast-paced energy transition that we are getting forced into adopting. I mean, we think that we are making the transition, but I think the changes are forcing transition, and these changes that are happening with every time, and this pace of transition is increasing. I mean, there has been a recent article by the head of engineering Google, who wrote a beautiful article about the pace of change that is happening, and he predicts that from the next 10 years, the pace of change is going to be 4x or whatever maximum that we saw in the last 10 years. And he talks about how we need to be competitive to be able to be keeping pace with the changes. So I would like to talk about these changes and reflect upon the reforms for commercialization of renewable energy. So starting with one of the great successes that we have, which we tom-tom about, is SECI tendering process. I think whatever great contribution that SECI has done, and it is very well lauded, I think that has come of age, and I think we need to be recognizing that we need to have a new kind of a framework to do business with. Currently, there is only one centralized tendering things. In states, there are few, and only one or two get the right responses, like from Gujarat, but no other tenders from the state utilities or on behalf of state utilities get the kind of response that SECI gets, or Gujarat state government gets, or NTPC or public sector units like that get. That itself is a restrictive market. The second is in terms of the design of this framework of tenders. That is to say that you have a pot of money and you are so eligible to make a bid, but you have not clearly tied up with the land, grid, and other issues, and preliminary financing, how we need to be so ready that in the tendering process, how to make sure that the success of what is the gigawatt hours is going to be generated is nearly close to the gigawatts of tenders that have been awarded. So that efficiency, if we have to march, we need to be looking around the world and see what are the best practices of such kind of tenders. We can look at South Africa, we can look at Brazil, we can look at also things like in terms of the design in UK, like contracts for difference and things like that. We need to be innovative. I think we are very momentum driven, and we go by the same thing as a printing press. Everything has a period of life, shelf life, and then we need to evolve for a change. There are other disadvantages with the SECI design as well. Fundamentally, in the SECI's design, the ISTS waiver is eligible only for utilities or public sector public sector companies who are making the bid, and they get the ISTS waiver. Why should it be? A corporate body is also a true citizen, and it should also be eligible for the ISTS waiver. It in fact will make the market more dynamic for a solar company in Rajasthan selling power using the same ISTS waiver within the same time period of exemption to a utility or a mining company or a manufacturing company in Maharashtra or Gujarat or someplace. It should be allowed because you have already factored in the amount of gigawatt hours of subsidy that you have to do, and that has been budgeted for. Given that ISTS is given, so it is creating some kind of distortion in the market. So where the projects are hosted or where the resource is higher, and it is being sold under the power sale agreement to the utilities that buy the power. But remember, it's the host companies that pay the additional cost of grid integration. The 2 rupees 77 paisa for wind or 1 rupee 99 paisa per kilowatt hour of solar, they are just the bus bar injection cost. There is a lot of additional congestion plus balancing cost that the host state has to take, and not the buying company that takes after it. Okay, so the host state is laden with additional costs unfairly. Second, the host state power system has to manage the inertia, the grid inertia that is there, which continuously keeps decreasing with more inverter based solar and wind that is being added there. So the state's thermal and conventional power generation needs to be working additional to be providing that inertia for the state power system to have. If we are not having adequate inertia system, the grid power system will not be able to be self-reverting and be able to correct all the minute disturbances that might happen. Similarly, reactive power consumption happens to be far greater in the host state, and that is not reflected in the current PPAs. The current PPAs are very binary in the sense that what you inject and what you get paid, and a small deviation of what is the reactive power. But I think we have come of age, and if we are going to be looking at 40% of renewable energy generation mix that we are going to be having, then we need to be starting to look at that the PPAs need to be far more dynamic and multidimensional to be capturing the time of generation, how much that you can offload, how much you can ramp up, how much time that you can respond to it, how much of reactive power, grid inertial response that you can offer. These are systems that we have to consider. These are a standard power system characteristics that are there that we take it for granted, and we thought that we could add wind and solar, not considering these things, and have a very very limited horse view kind of a PPAs. I think we need to evolve far greater than that. Um, of course, as Yuvraj rightly pointed out, discoms is clearly the bottleneck of how we are going to, whether we can reach the targets that we have in place or not. So the um, we are, I mean, there's a lot of discussion whether there needs to be privatization or allowing a third party to come and operate, and or have separation of carriage and content. And the LCT amendment bill, which is being considered now and in the last few phases, is going to be looking at these aspects into how whether needs to be. There's a lot of state and center reactions to what is the rights of the center, and what is the rights of the state, and what is the concurrent in the electricity amendment bill that is being proposed, whether it is privatization or enforcement of contracts or staffing the state regulatory commissions, issues related to that. Uh, Recently, I thought I came across a very interesting note. Uh, in addition to my view that the only way out for the country uh, to be able to survive and meet its future clean energy needs is to have a on the lines of a bad bank, a bad discom that we need to be having on the very lines of um, uh, asset renewals companies. We need to be having that. But I thought I got across from Vinayak Chatterjee from Feedback a much better idea, which I saw he tweeted a couple of days back, which he says that on the lines of NTPC or PGCIL or NHPC, it is time to have a national distribution power company, because if you are trying to tinker on a piecemeal basis the discoms, I don't think we are going to be having a sustainable, robust, a dynamic power system in India, because the discoms are the last and the most crucial link of the power system. And how much ever that you would do in terms of Uday or any scheme of this sort, it is not going to be helping. And there is a need for a national distribution company to be coming in place. Having said that, the customer end applications like the rooftop solar, and solar is one of the technologies which is so great that at some point you're going to be having the god parity, as probably one of the esteemed global think tank had mentioned, where the cost of solar generation together with battery would be cheaper than the transmission cost. So at those points, what are you going to do? We also need to be looking at how the regulatory framework is going to be helping in customer end solutions. If you are going to be looking at only utility scale, I think you need to be understanding the standard constraints in highly dense, highly populated country like we have. We can't go ahead simply by having ground mounted solar or wind in the way that we did in the past, because the land usage is so very high. So we need to be increasing. See, solar and wind are both very dilute energies, right? So you capture them, you concentrate them, put it through one pipe, put it to the grid system, and then you are getting it across the customers. Again, you're distributing the whole thing. So I don't think it is the right way, where especially where the land is a big constraint for a country like Australia or US, it might be the right way. They have far greater land than what is the population areas where they could do that. They could have such kind of things and pump out solar energy to outside the state and have a undersea cable to Singapore and the Asian countries. But India might have to have a different kind of a model. I think we need to be looking at how we can multiply and concentrate energy. Hybrids is one way. We also need to be looking at how is it that the way forward that we should be looking at. And technology is jumping so fast, and we need to be catching up and making sure there are commercial realities in place and the regulatory framework is there enough to make those things possible. The rule making is always a lag, but if the industry and the likes of the think tanks like Yuvraj and others are able to think and provide this kind of a support to the government agencies, it would be faster. For example, we need to be looking at how we need to be going forward, how we should be only be considering firm renewable energy. So the problem so far, world across, grid integrational thing has been variable renewable energy, right? Wind and solar. The solar has great certainty. It starts with sunrise, ends with sunset. But in between, there is a huge uncertainty of the variations at light speed. Wind, the uncertainties, the ramp up and ramp downs are an order lesser than solar, and also not so fast, but it has huge uncertainty because we don't know what the next day's predictability has to be. So when you're going to be combining these two and adding biomass or geothermal or other renewable energy or tidal, and I'm talking about whether it be onshore or offshore. I mean, all these options are possible both onshore or offshore. We need to be looking at how are we going to be using this combined solar and wind and other renewable sources. How can we be providing schedulable power on demand? So we should be allowing corporate PPAs, merchant PPAs to be allowing. So if there is an entity which is a mining company and that works for 12 hours and it wants to have power from morning 7 o'clock till evening 7 o'clock, and it wants to have power, you should be allowing it to be using the wires just like the national highways and pay the toll and be getting the power across. It should be left to the private sector, who is going to be providing and working hard to be providing a solution either with a pump storage or with a battery or with hydrogen, and providing that solution to the end game. The current design of the whole game of renewable energy seems to be so licensed, Raj, like pre 1991 SECI tender, GUVNL tender, or NTPC tender. I mean, I think we should be having frameworks where you should be allowing, like just like in the Netherlands, where they had allowed an offshore wind project combined with any other combination, including hydrogen production, no subsidy, and asked for bids to come by, and it was around 760 odd megawatts project that happened some 6 7 months back, and they asked people to bid for an innovative project of this sort. And lo behold, you had an offshore wind, offshore solar, on-site battery, on-site hydrogen production, no subsidy being given, being sold to a utility in Netherlands, and a project that was to come by in, I think, 36 months from the award of the project. This kind of innovation should be allowed for a country that is taking pride to be saying that startup country, we have so many startup culture, we need to be allowing these kind of a things to come by. If the whole industry is going to be on in the queue for getting awards of projects with SECI, GUNL, NTPC and things sort, I don't think the pipeline is broad enough to say you might going to have a manufacturing in place. I don't think you would have, though the potential and applicability is so high, I don't think that rooftop will be good enough, because the discoms and the grid operators don't have the capacity to be thinking how should a new innovative PPA should be, which is a win-win for me and also for the developer and also for the owner, and whether it is in terms of looking at hydrogen production, which is the new topic now. It's yes, we should begin the hydrogen production, but please understand, hydrogen production largely more than 90% of it is based upon, and especially the green hydrogen is essentially based upon splitting the water. And India is a water deficit country, so you cannot be thinking about onshore green hydrogen. You will have to think about offshore green hydrogen, and we need to be looking at how it is produced, how it is transported, and how it is going to be used. We have niche industries where it can take off. We need to be looking at how the uh, power production and consumption um, can be structured in such a way that you could have flexibility in power dispatch for commercialization of these projects. And if you're looking at energy storage, there are a lot of services that the batteries or the pump storage or compressed air or flywheel or gravity kind of a solutions can offer. These need to be structured, and there are multiple value streams and services they can then be given. If we are only going to be allowing firming of power and dispatching the power at a later time for meeting peaking power, I don't think that is good enough to capture the whole value of the storage system. So we need to be having how you're going to be having providing ancillary services and how they can be done. And I think it's time for having a national energy storage mission, specifically for the grid. The way that we are going with electric vehicles and where renewables can provide inputs for the industry is great, but I think it is high time that we also lay enough attention to the grid scale energy storage systems, whether it be solar integrated storage or wind integrated storage systems or wind solar integrated storage systems, or just for the utility's sake. If we are going to be having some 80 gigawatts of wind and solar that are connected with and pumping in variable intermittent electricity into grid, it is like poison. So you need to have discoms and grid operators, POSOCO, PGCIL, planning to be saying how they're going to be managing this 80 gigawatts at some point in time. And you need to be also be allowing these old owners, old wind farms, old solar grid utility, ground mounted things, how to have these PPAs restructured so that they can add storage or other solutions to provide a more firmer power that the utilities and grid operators can manage.